am your host, Bree Wilde, and this is Marquee Memories. Here we sit down with your favorite artists to talk about their top concert memories as fans. Today's guests are two-thirds of an indie rock band who've had steady success since the release of their debut album in 2007. They're currently in the thick of Oh the Tour to promote their sixth studio album, Oh the Ocean, the Wombats. Welcome.
Thank you.
Did I say that Oh with enough exclamation?
You nailed it. It's perfect.
So I know you guys are playing a show tonight in LA and that you're singers from here, but where do you guys call home?
For me, it's Oslo in Norway. And you are...
I live in Liverpool.
Which is technically the home of the band, because that's where we met.
Yeah, and we all lived there for about the first 8 years of the band, and then we all splintered off. I lived in Paris, you went to Oslo, Murph went over to LA, and then I've just gradually moved back via London to Liverpool. The Mersey called me home. Yeah.
So, but you spent quite a bit of time here when recording this album, right?
Yeah. So, the latest
2 months
album.
last summer.
Yeah, it was nearly 2 months. We stayed in Hollywood for a bit and then in Silver Lake and recorded with John Congleton in his studio. We know the city pretty well.
And we did our whole second album here as well. And obviously the fact that Murph lives out here, we've been over here writing together many times. So it's probably outside of our hometown. It's like, like really genuinely know if I got in a car without Google Maps, I could probably find my way around.
Even I don't do that.
I
wouldn't risk it, but
I would definitely spend more time in LA than most other cities in the world, apart from where we live. So, yeah.
So when I was researching other interviews that you did for this album, I thought one of the interesting points was that your producer didn't want to hear any demos, that you guys he wanted you to play it live. Did that mean that when it came to playing these songs on stage, it was just like, well, we've done it already?
It definitely made it a bit easier, than some previous albums, maybe, or especially the one before this, because it was during the pandemic and Murph was in LA and Tord was in Oslo and I was in London, and
it's all recorded in different rooms, different studios, completely like separate from each other.
Like the first time we actually played, the songs live or ever together. Some of them was literally just before we went on. We did a gig. So this one was definitely a bit easier. Although the tricky thing is because each take, because John wanted pretty much like full takes of everything. So if one of us, which never happens, of course, but a little mistake in the second verse, let's say, or I went into a chorus wrong, then John would be like, okay, yeah, cool. Let's just do the whole thing again. It'd be like, no, we can just punch in for that one bit. The rest of it was great. No, you just do the whole thing again. And we'd be like, right, okay. And we got used to that way of working. And actually it's so true that the nuances of every performance are slightly different. And especially because me and him were playing everything live together, you end up pushing and pulling and in different ways that makes each take kind of unique. So,
and also we kept a lot of the sort of live elements of, it wasn't absolutely perfectly played exactly how you intended it to be.
Speak for yourself, fella.
Yes, that's what I'm doing. I was talking at one specific point. But yeah, so that definitely gave it a bit more of a live feeling when you're listening back to it as well, I think.
And part of it was you didn't want this to be like super polished, right? You wanted the album to be a little non-algorithmy, non-AI, right?
100%, yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've especially our first album was literally live, apart from redoing the vocals on top, but like we always loved like capturing a live energy, and we've always tried to do that. But sometimes, you obviously you get a bit obsessed with like synths for a while and programming things, and like we've gone through different, as most bands do, probably little discovery journeys here and there, and then you get really into like that gridded world for a while. And so this one was definitely like a back to basics and just capturing that essence of three people who've played together in a band for years. And what does that sound like?
So not that much tweaking when it came to, deciding on the songs for the tour and everything.
No, yeah.
Nice.
I had to relearn a couple of fills that were like probably just happened in one take randomly.
Yeah.
You're jamming something and then it gets kept, but you don't think about it again. So 3 months later, when it comes to actually learn the song, you're like, what?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, cool. What am I actually playing there? That's
just
weird.
recreating all the mistakes as well.
Yeah.
yeah.
That would have been a good name for the tour, the Recreating Mistakes Tour. Yeah.
I don't know. I like Oh. I really love Sorry I'm Late, I Didn't Want to Come is one of my favorite songs. of the year.
nice.
Sure. Even Taylor Swift can't knock it out.
No.
Shall we go to some of these memories?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Stones.
The Rolling Stones, Valle, Hovin in Oslo, 1998. It was the Bridges to Babylon tour, and it was actually the very first gig I ever went to. My uncle, who was a Rolling Stones fan, and he was like the cool uncle or whatever, he took me and my brother to Oslo to see them, and it absolutely blew my mind. And then obviously fast forward many years till 2019, we actually ended up supporting the Stones in the MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. Yeah. That was the kind of like a full circle moment, really. So it's kind of two gigs. The one that was the first one I ever saw, and then the second being when we actually played with them.
That was just that was insane, and that was the first time I'd ever seen them live in 2019.
When you played?
Yeah. So because we got the gig because Mick Jagger had heart surgery, I believe, and the video that he posted to say like, "Hey, I'm back," was he was dancing and singing along to Techno Fan, one of our songs. And our phones started just going off, and our friends and everything like, "Have you seen it?" Yeah. And it was on the news and everything, like with Techno Fan playing. And we were like, "Oh my God." And then our manager, we were like, "Do you reckon we could like, get a gig with them?" And
just reach out.
Cheeky manager goes like, "Hey fellas, the Bats are very excited to perform with you if you let them." And they were like, "Yeah, cool. Do you want to do this show?" And so all our family and like loads of friends came over to New York, and like we made a week of it, and it was one of the most amazing experiences. And Stones like was so welcoming, and got to meet them all, and like had a chat, and they were just lovely. And personally, I didn't know what to expect because I'd never seen them live. And obviously, at this point, they were probably like late 70s, I think. So, for a big stadium rock band at that age, like I didn't know exactly what to expect. And they were absolutely incredible. And it gave us, I think that was another inspiring moment for us all, being like, well, maybe we can keep going this long,
just they had that energy, and they had that sort of like,
passion,
they really had fun. They had fun playing. I think that's just like when you see someone still after that many years having that sort of like energy, and they're so happy to be there and to play together. If we can even just like take a little percentage of that into the future somehow,
it was just amazing.
Would be amazing.
So let's go back to it being your first show. Did you know of the band before you went, or are you just like, cool, uncle's taking me to a show?
No, I had the album.
Okay.
But I didn't have that many older albums. It was actually the Bridges to Babylon album that we had on repeat, because that was the tour that they were doing. It was just incredible. I just remember at some point this kind of like big bridge just came out in the middle of the stage, and then and they had like this stage in the middle of the crowd, and they did like all the big songs in the crowd. Nice. They did that with when we saw them as well, did they?
They did. They had like a walkway, and then they did like a couple of acoustic songs.
That's what they did. Yeah,
I think they did like Wild Horses and a couple of others like in that middle thing, which obviously for most stadium bands works really well when you have that like slight change of scene and mood change, and people in different parts get a bit more like
excited,
up close and personal. But
so you were young. Were you into music yet at that time? Like, did you go home and like, I'm going to be in a band?
Yes. Yeah, and it probably wasn't the Rolling Stones that was the kind of like inspiration to kind of like want to be in a band or to play in a band. It was maybe more like, I don't know, skate punk, and it was like Green Day when they released Dookie, and The Offspring when they released Smash, and Weezer, Blue Album. Okay. It was a lot of those kind of bands that really... Because I came from classical music. I played cello from a very young age. And I feel like those bands really changed changed what I wanted to do. Because like playing classical music was fun. But again, to play guitar or bass was a lot cooler at that time.
Did any of those bands come to you though? Like, did you get to see them when you were?
No, because as I told you off camera before, it was like living in Norway. A lot of these bands didn't make it to Norway, so they make it to Sweden maybe, or like for you it was a bit easier. Maybe you saw Green Day, didn't you?
Yeah. So coming from Liverpool, we were not a major city on especially big American bands. Like I'd have to go to Manchester to see them, but I did go and see Green Day. I was like 14, but that was genuinely a moment where I was absolutely loved Dookie and then Nimrod, and I think it was on the Nimrod tour that I saw them. So like 97, 98, and went with my sister and my dad and a couple of friends, and I remember stood in the middle at the MEN, as it was called then, like a big arena in Manchester. And just being blown away and having genuinely that feeling of like, because I was really into Nirvana, and like, so I'd started playing the drums. I too was a flautist in an orchestra, and then was like, the drums are way cooler. And so I just loved all the like fast and energetic, like upbeat music, and I'd be playing along at home with my boom blaster, and then seeing
Boom
them
blaster,
there.
yes.
Yeah. And turn that down, the parents, and then going to see them live anyway, and just being blown away by it and the energy and like that carefree environment of like being at big shows that I hadn't really experienced before, singing along to every song and everyone just dancing and having fun. And I remember just being like, oh my God, what I'd give one day to like be on that stage. And this year we actually played on that stage. And it was a weird gig for me because I kept having flashbacks to me as a 14-year-old being in the crowd. Like, and then I was there, and that was a proper full circle one for me.
Amazing. So Green Day was kind of a formative band for you guys then.
Yeah.
Nice.
100%. Yeah.
But Rolling Stones taught you that you could do it for a long
time. Yes.
Well, and I was in a cover band from about the age of 15, and we play all like old classic rock stuff. So like Eagles, Cream, Beatles, Rolling Stones, like we did all that sort of stuff, and played at weddings and various other things. And so the Rolling Stones, I was so glad I got to say to Charlie Watts, like, thanks so much. I learned to play the drums and like, you know, to your music. And I mean, you learn things from different musicians, obviously as a kid. But yeah, I did literally just play along and learn to like sing and play at the same time. And
you got to tell him.
I got to tell him. Yeah. So it was nice.
When you guys got together, because you got together at Performing Arts School, right? In university?
Yeah.
Did you like get together because you liked the same bands, or like what was the connecting point?
Well, me and Murph started playing some acoustic stuff together the year before Todd arrived, and
it's pretty random
Smashing
how you
Pumpkins was definitely like Machina. I remember that was the first album we listened to together just after we'd met, and we'd had a few drinks, and we got back to my flat and just put it on and sat there and listened to the whole thing and just chatted and like probably air guitared along to a few of the riffs and stuff, and definitely realized then like, oh, we like the same stuff, and then started chatting, and before you know it, like we'd made a couple of songs and started playing them, and then we were like, oh, it'd be fun to actually, you know, start a proper band. And then Murph met Todd.
Yeah, but it is those kind of random moments. It was just on a night out through. I made friends with one in our class. He was actually from America. He was from Orange County. And he was the glue that kind of got me to meet Murph at that given time. And I think it's just like sometimes just those random moments when that just happens to
serendipitous,
happen.
which is perfect.
You know, like, and we're just on a night out, and Ben was saying like, oh, you should do something more with your songs, Murph. They're great. Todd plays bass, by the way. You know, like maybe he can join or whatever. And that was the kind of glue. And then we had a rehearsal the next day or something, I think, or 2 days after or something. And that's kind of like how it all happened. Pretty like random, and yeah, we just continued, and we weren't particularly good at the time either. The songs were good, but I think we like as a band, we definitely.
Well, no one needs to hit it out of the park right away.
Exactly.
Yeah,
sometimes if
19.
people become famous before they've had a chance to like practice, it isn't always a good turnout, you know?
No.
Yeah.
You gotta be.
We needed a couple of years.
Scrappy for a couple of years.
You need to have somewhere to go, right?
Yes, exactly. Anything else about the Stones you'd like to say?
I do remember when when it actually was happening, and they said, "Oh, Mick really wants to meet you guys," or whatever, and then we got invited to his backstage room or whatever, and we started chatting. I was like super nice, like really down to earth. You know, we were all kind of like, you know, pooping our pants a little bit, like
all starry-eyed.
yeah, exactly. But then I just remember, like, because you're talking about like me being from Norway, and he said, "Oh, my trainer's from Norway." He says, and you were like looking down at his shoes, like, "Oh, I didn't know the New Balance were from Norway." And I was like, how can it be that quick and funny, like in terms in front of like Mick Jagger? I mean,
it was a good icebreaker. He laughed a lot, and then
he was some banter.
Such a nice guy.
Amazing. Shall we skip ahead to Radiohead?
Radiohead, Victoria Park, Warrington, 2000. I'd fallen in love with Radiohead. They were kind of a band that like really blew my mind, actually, because going from loving loads of like grunge and punk rock and stuff, it was probably like, I feel like it was 98. It was around when OK Computer came out, and my friend had a CD Walkman, and he said, "Listen to this," and like I put them headphones in, and it was from the word go. I was just like, and then he kept trying to get his CD Walkman back off me, and I was like, "Next song," because back then there was no other way of me getting to hear this music until I got to the music store or whatever. So I listened to the whole album. In the end, he gave up, and I just listened to it all, and then bought the album, and then went back and did the Bends and Pablo Honey. And then when Kid A came out, I hadn't had a chance to see them live, and then they were coming to Warrington, which is like 25-30 minutes from Liverpool, and so a bunch of us, and it was on the Kid A tour, went to see them in this big top that they set up in a park, and again it was just mind-blowing. You know, I was 16 then, and like getting really into music, and anytime anyone would ask me like, what do you want to do, you know, for a career, because you get to that age, don't you, and all the teachers and everyone start asking you, like, come on, you need to think about what you're doing after school. And I was just like, I just want to do music. And seeing Radiohead was just like a cementing that kind of I think I'd been to Leeds Festival that summer, which was like that, saw Foo Fighters and loads of bands that I loved and just blew my mind. And then but the Radiohead one, I remember just being like, oh, right, come on, knuckle down now, let's crack on. And they were such an important band, I think, for all three of us, like Murph especially. Like I think he even played in a Radiohead cover band.
He was in a cover band, Radiohead cover band at some point. And and it's the same for all of us, really. Like Radiohead was that another band that we had in common, and
especially Kid A, I feel like, as well, like going from, you know, being this kind of like a bit more indie on the first two albums, then obviously OK Computer just being like a mind blower, but then Kid A coming at you going like, what on earth is this? You know, how is this? That doesn't sound anything like the last album they've done, you know, completely different. And then you've got haters on it. And like, I remember all this, it's like, it was very divisive of like, that's not what they're about, you know. But I always just loved the creativity and like the audacity to just completely change tone and who you are as a band. And like, I think we all loved that and that was, really respected it.
And that's inspiring as well, seeing a band like that are willing to
take risks.
You know, take risks.
Didn't hurt them.
No, absolutely not. No, it was, and then obviously they stayed in that path for a few albums, and then I mean, it's just one of the great.
Did you get to see them live?
I did see them a few years later though, because you saw them in 2000. I saw them in 2004 after I moved to the UK.
Was that on Hail to the Thief?
Yes, and it was, and I think. Didn't we go? Were you?
I think you went with Murph, and I didn't get a ticket, and I had to drive to Newcastle to see them, which was a 3.5 hour drive.
Yeah. This is Manchester Evening News Arena, so it's the same venue that we talked about for Green Day.
Oh, nice.
Again, unbelievable. You know, like, and then absolutely, and it was so inspiring as well. You know, like really couldn't wait to get back and start like writing some songs and with that in mind, and just to be like visually and like just sounded incredible.
Because lots of these moments as well are like, obviously you make all these songs and you do gigs and stuff, and especially as a young band, you know, you can be a bit frustrated of like, oh, it's not happening, why aren't we getting signed, what's going on? And seeing moments like that can really give you a boost of like, you know, maybe we can, you know, I don't know, it can reinvigorate like the whole thought process behind being in a band.
Permission to explore a little bit.
Yeah. And also, exactly. Yeah. Just like maybe kicks something off in your brain, and maybe you go on a different journey for a little bit. And yeah, they've always been in the back of our minds of like, can we do this? Yeah, of course we can. Look, Radiohead did all sorts of mad stuff.
Did you at any point play with Radiohead?
We did, yeah. In France, I believe, in a place called
Arras.
That is it. It was this square. It was kind of like a mini festival, wasn't it? And there was a great lineup as well for that mini festival. I know Sigur Rós was playing.
It was like Radiohead, Sigur Rós, Vampire Weekend, and us.
Very random lineup.
But we were there getting photos with like Radiohead's, cases and stuff, like all of us just, that was 2008.
We were and completely all over that. Yeah, that was crazy.
That was the In Rainbows period. And I think that was actually probably the best time I've ever seen them play.
So Radiohead made you feel like when you left the show, you felt more inspired to go home and create.
Yeah, every time, yeah.
Shall we go to Paul McCartney?
Paul McCartney, ACL, Austin, Texas, 2018. We're certainly talking about some of the greats here. Paul McCartney, obviously coming from Liverpool, was always just like a figure in the city, but obviously in the global music world. But especially being from Liverpool, I feel like him and what he achieved and the Beatles in general was definitely a kind of some other guys from this city went on to do do something. And I know there's other artists from Liverpool, of course, but they are one of the ones. And so I think it gives any musician in Liverpool a little tiny bit of belief that, well, if they can, maybe we can. And Paul McCartney put his money where his mouth was with helping the arts in Liverpool as well by setting up a school there called Lipper, which is where we actually all met. So we met him recently.
So it's actually thanks to Paul McCartney that the Wombats even exist.
Yeah, right? Thanks, Paul. No, it was, and we got to say to him recently, we were made companions of Lipper.
It's only a couple of months ago.
And it was an incredible occasion and honour and all the rest of it. And we got to, we said hi to Paul again, and we're just thanks so much. Without you, we wouldn't be a band. And he was like, really? And we were like, well, yeah, if you hadn't have started this school, it wouldn't have given us
have been any
petri dish to, to form. He was like, oh, that's cool. And we're like, yes, it is. Thank you. You're pretty cool. But anyway, so he's definitely been a big, part in the Wombat story, whether he's known about it or not. And, but seeing him live, we played at ACL 2018 and then went to watch him. And again, it's that late 70s, just still absolutely smashing it out the park. At that show anyway, it was incredible. And there's loads of memories from it, but my favourite part of the set was when he played In Spite of All the Danger. And it's from the Quarry, when it was the Quarrymen before the Beatles. It's a real, and there's no chance he's ever going to play that. But I used to play it with some friends in a folk trio that I was in, and we busked that in Liverpool, on the streets. So I have all these memories with that song, and there's beautiful harmony. It's such a lovely song. If you haven't heard it, check it out. And he played it anyway, and I was just there. I felt like I was the only one in the crowd.
What kind of mind meld had to happen? I know for that.
It's oh, he's playing this, and everyone's like, what's this song? I was like,
it's for me.
This is one of my favourite songs ever.
It's for me.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Which reminds me of actually the first time I saw Radiohead, they didn't play Street Spirit. So it was the opposite moment where the set finished, and Street Spirit was one of the first songs I learned to play on the acoustic, and figuring out the finger plucking pattern, and they didn't play it, and I was like, oh.
Didn't quite have the same.
And they never played Creep either, did they?
Yeah, I didn't. That didn't. I didn't mind
so much.
as much that one. I mean, I absolutely love the song, but it was Street Spirit for me. But they did play it at another show, another time.
Yep.
What else from Paul McCartney's show?
The big question is, where the hell was I? I don't know why. we played there, and I was there, but I didn't go to the show. So I wonder what happened.
Were you busy?
I must have been very busy doing something way
drinking
more
margaritas backstage.
Yeah, probably that would be my guess.
Have you ever seen Paul though?
I haven't.
Oh, well, hopefully he's.
I only met him in person, and that's
still
about
cool
it.
though.
Yeah.
We did actually interview him one time on Radio 1 in the UK, but Tor didn't say a word. He was so nervous.
I was so nervous. Yeah.
And me and Murph at the time, we were really nervous as well, because it was the first time we were going to be interviewing on Radio 1, and we shared a bottle of wine like just before the interview, and then we were and it just took the edge off, and then we had a really lovely chat with him, and he was so nice. Like, but I remember Tor just sat there, and we were like, "Do you want to ask anything?" And he's just like,
obviously, being the bass player as well, it's kind of like he's like, you know, the whole thing with I mean, he's meant a lot to a lot of bass players, I guess, but he's the way he's so melodic with his bass lines and stuff.
Oh yeah,
it's obviously super important, and yeah, for any bass player, I suppose. Yeah.
Speaking of other shows, did you guys know there's a lot of other shows happening in LA tonight? That makes me not able to come to your show. That's not fair.
No.
That's not fair.
Who else is playing?
All Time Low. Like pop
it
punk.
is LA as well,
Pop
so it's
punk, yeah.
Yeah.
Says All Time Low is playing YouTube Theater. A Day to Remember and Yellow Card are playing in Ontario. I think 21 Pilots are playing at the Belasco. It's just a very busy month.
Oh well.
So,
hopefully some people will come to our show.
I think you're fine. I think there's enough people in LA for you to not worry about your show. But yeah, I hate when that happens. So I know you have a really busy touring schedule. You're just barely in the middle of it, right? You would say kind of in the middle?
Kind of just started, I feel like. Yeah. 4 shows in.
Well,
and
on the US tour, but
yeah,
in terms of the album, we're probably just over halfway.
Yeah.
Do you have any shows coming up that you're going to as fans, or is that not even a possibility when you're on tour?
It's pretty tricky. We don't normally get to like do it, because especially if you have a night off,
you
kind of like don't want to go and blast my ears with more music, even if. But
we were like looking at the Oasis shows to see if there was any crossovers, but then nah, it's not happening. But I would have done that if it was a good, if we were in the same town. I would definitely have gone to that.
Also, festivals, they're the best ones when you get to like, you can play a show and then get to check out loads of other acts. That's always really nice.
Do you have some festivals coming up at the end of this year?
Or no, it's going to be more next year.
Kind of like just finished a festival season.
Who have you seen on festivals that you were like excited to be on the bill with?
Gorillaz, incredible.
Yeah.
Tame Impala, unbelievable.
I mean, when we played with the same festival as Metallica a bunch of times, that is like
such a fun show.
It's an amazing, fun show to watch as well. In the Snake Pit, you remember that?
Do they still play when they play at because I know when they play their shows they do like in the round, right? But they can't do that at a festival.
No,
right?
not a festival.
Okay. No. So they have to set it up slightly differently.
Yeah, they still have the walkway coming out.
Yeah, that's like it's not just like the VIP. They do like a kind of like the blocking off, and they kind of just like
instead of the mosh pit, it's the snake pit for the Metallica fans.
I don't think anyone's moshing in the snake pit though. That's the only problem.
Was it called the snake pit? I
think that's what it's called.
I think he's just made this up.
Imagine if I just made that up. Or I think in my head it was called that, and then it's not actually called that.
Like, where did he get that from?
There's been a few times we've seen Metallica. It was like Austin City Limits,
yeah,
where we actually played the same stage.
Oh, nice.
So again, similar to Radiohead, we were kind of like seeing all the flight cases and doing like silly, photos next to them or whatever. Yeah, that was great.
Rock Werchter in Belgium, I remember seeing them there. That was just amazing.
Lollapalooza as well. So we've seen them a few times actually. I've seen them in Roskilde Festival as well.
Okay.
In Denmark. This is like 2001 though, so that was great as well.
Yeah, I loved them growing up. Loved loads of metal stuff, and the guitarist in the first band I was in, he loved Kirk Hammett, and he was constantly just like ripping solos,
shredding.
Like, and he'd be going like, and I was sat there just like, how are your fingers moving that fast? And he was just so into him. So yeah, Metallica were not for me on drums or anything else, but just my friend was like, he was mega inspired by them.
Nice.
Yeah.
Then you have a deluxe version or an extended version of your album coming out in December?
Yeah, we've got a new song coming out tomorrow. That as part of that, and then I think the deluxe version's out like December.
Okay.
Yeah, it's always nice to like, I suppose it's replaced B-sides or whatever. It's kind of like there are always some extra songs lying around that maybe one of us really wanted to be on the album, or or didn't.
Because Holy Sugar was the most recent one, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we're hopefully going to play that tonight in LA for the first time.
That's our hope. We're gonna go and do the sound check now, and hopefully, like,
we've got it pretty close already. But again, that's
in the ballpark.
Gotta feel it out.
First moment that you play it live and getting the sounds right and transitions and all that.
And when you play a song live, like, what are you looking for? Are you trying to not screw it up, or are you looking for like audience reaction to see if it's going to stay in the set?
Oh yeah, the first time you play it, I feel like the first time you play a song, it's definitely a like for you moment. It's like I feel like some of the older songs, it's definitely you're with the crowd, you're looking out, you can, because it's in your bones so much, you can just be floating with everyone else. Whereas with a new song, you're definitely still thinking a lot about what you're doing, and also just being like, this is so fun to play. Maybe you don't even notice what's going on,
and also just trying to remember it and kind of like use it.
Fuck up.
Yeah, basically. But no, it's it takes like 2 or 3 gigs of doing that, and then suddenly it's the same as all the other songs. So, but if we play it tonight, I'm gonna be feeling a bit nervous about that, I reckon, or like at least being super focused in on trying to get the parts right.
Yeah. But if it has a good reaction, are you gonna keep it in the set?
No,
we'll play it for a while. Yeah, defo.
Cool.
Yeah, it's gonna be. Usually works out one way or another.
How much flexibility is there in the set list when do you like start out and then like have band meetings afterwards and are like, we should switch this up?
Yeah, if a set doesn't feel like it flows that well, or if if there's a song that
like this one,
that we want to put in or swap out, then but we usually like
it's quite consistent, I would say, and also like because we've been touring all year and we kind of found like this kind of perfect what we at least what we think, or I at least feel comfortable with, I guess.
Okay.
And then we kind of make like if we only got an hour and a half, then we make an hour and a half version. Then it's like an hour and 40 is the full set. And then it's like if you got an hour set in a festival, and then so we got all these like templates of like how to fill a certain time slot at this point anyway. So it feels like it's pretty easy.
And then if a festival's like, oh, you've got 70 minutes instead of 60, it'd be like, all right, cool, we can add 2 songs. Which ones out of these does everyone feel like adding? And sometimes even like crew or, front of house guy might be like, oh, I thought Methods of the Madness sounded great last night. Why don't you put, and be like, yeah, okay, cool, let's put. So you just get a bit of feedback from people, and whatever mood you're in on that day, you kind of add things in, and
Once you guys are on album 10, are you going to be playing like 3-hour-long shows?
Bruce Springsteen style. Yeah.
I mean, that'll be intense.
I feel like
the more
2 hours maybe max.
The thing is that the more albums you have, the harder it gets to obviously pick the songs, and you want to do at least 3 songs from each album, I guess, and so it will be a longer set for sure on album 10.
Yeah,
just how long did the spirit of the Rolling Stones?
Yeah, how long did the Stones play?
No, I think they're about 2 hour mark.
Okay. Yeah,
I think 2 hours is about a nice.
And also, I think
you
it's
can manage that because physically, as we get by album 10, we could be like 50 odd by then. So, God knows what state we'll be in.
I also think for fans and the crowd as well, like anything longer than 2 hours is pretty. It gets a bit long, doesn't it?
Gonna have to put an intermission in.
Yeah. But it's like how the Eagles did it. Like when we saw them, it was here in LA at the Forum. They did like 1 set and then they came off for 15 minutes. They did 45 minutes, 15-minute break, 45, 15-minute break, 45, 15-minute break. Right. Maybe that's the way really we should do it.
Yeah. We'll see.
Put some breaks.
Many options.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing these memories with us today.
Thanks
Good
for
luck on the
us.
rest of the tour, and I know you got dates all the way until next year, so.
Yeah.